what have I done? Because I'd gone from living in this luxury apartment in New York City, planning my dream destination wedding and like having all of these friends flying in from all over the country. Next thing, I'm living in my childhood bedroom. Whenever you put somebody else on a pedestal, so you're saying your mom has all of the opinions or all of the right answers, or this guy, if he loves you, then you're lovable. If your friend invites you to the disco on Saturday night, then you must be a good friend or cool enough. Like every time we make somebody else's actions or decisions higher than our own, or if they do something, then we've put somebody above ourselves.
Where are you now? You're in Portugal?
I am currently in Portugal. Yeah, I'm in the Algarve in the south of Portugal. It's kind of like my second home because my parents live here. So it's nice to be back and I have the house to myself. So it's really beautiful.
Amazing. Okay, so let's get into it. You are a breathwork instructor and a codependency coach.
Yes, I am.
And breathwork, for people who don't know what it is the most amazing, intense. Like, I always find it quite intense. I've been to one of your sessions and then another one, and both of them were like crazy stuff happened to it during it. Because I feel like when you say breathwork, people just think, okay, it's like meditation, or you're just breathing, or it's like super basic. It's like, why would you have to go to a class to do that? But when you do it, especially the one you ran, it's like so powerful. Emotions come up, like you process things. Like I feel like there's like tears, there's maybe like laughter, it's like I don't know how to describe it. Like, how do you usually describe it to people?
It's so much. Yeah. There's so many different types of breath work, which is why so many people think that, oh, it's just like taking a deep breath and a big exhale, which is technically breath work as well. The type of breath work that I teach is called somatic release, which is the session that you came to. And so what we're doing is we're using a specific breath pattern to amplify a different state of being in your body. So just like when you're really stressed or you're really anxious, you should learn to slow down your breath and do those big inhales, long exhales, and feel the relief from that. You can also use your breath to cultivate different states of being. So at the beginning of these sessions, we like drop in and we set an intention, but the first part of the class is all about releasing. And in order to release, we have to go into the subconscious mind. We have to go back into the feeling that maybe we never got to fully feel all the way through. We get to go back to beliefs that have been ingrained in us that are no longer of service. And so we really get to connect to all of these things by using a certain breath pattern, which is the specific breath pattern that we use for that is putting you into a state of fight or flight. So you're actually choosing to go into that heightened nervous system where we do get into a little bit of panic, but we're doing it in such a safe environment that we get to use that, and we get to trust our body, and we get to lean into our bodies, and we get to see what comes up in those spaces. And like you said, these emotions come up. Sometimes there's anger, sometimes there's sadness, sometimes there's grief, sometimes there's laughter and joy and pleasure, and sometimes people experience like sexual trauma like come up. You can't predict what you're going to experience in any given session. It's always so different. And so with that, you just got to kind of come into the session with this open mind of, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm here to experience, and I'm here to trust that what's meant to come up will come up. And that's exactly what's needed at this moment for myself. And I'm going to trust my breath in that. So breath, using your breath in certain different patterns and rhythms and amplifying it or slowing it down activates our nervous system into different states of being. And so that's why it's so powerful, because there's not many times when you're, on purpose putting yourself into a state of fight or flight to get consciousness around what you've been avoiding and actually facing those things.
Amazing. And then what does codependency coaching entail for people who are not familiar?
Yeah, Well, that's really hard to put into words because everybody's codependency looks so different depending on your upbringing, depending on what you've experienced in your childhood and what you're playing out as you've grown up, as you're in your adulthood now. So every client sessions look different, but what I work with a lot on is dating. A lot of women will come to me who are repeating old cycles of people pleasing and attachment and anxiety and just really living out this stress of needing something and forcing something, kind of been in denial about the current situation and not seeing things clearly because there's such a force for, I want to be in a relationship, I want to have this, and let me just pretend that anything that's wrong with this isn't there so that I can create that, or I can force something to be something that it isn't. And so inside of codependency coaching, depending on whether we're working with dating, relating, family dynamics, personal conflicts, could be around food, could be around work. We're really just getting back to the core of what you're doing that is neglecting yourself in the hub of trying to manage and manipulate everybody else's judgment or behavior or perspective about you or their own life. So it's hard to put into words what happens in codependency coaching just because the range of it can be so broad. But really what the ultimate goal is to help people come back into connection with themselves, back into strength with themselves so that they can speak their truth, so that they can embody their truth, so that they can cultivate relationships that are healthy and they're not getting lost in these different dynamics that are going on.
Mm-hmm. And how do you usually define codependency for someone who's never heard that term? I'm just thinking if like my dad happens to be listening to this podcast, he'll have no idea what it is, but I am very familiar with what it is.
Yes. So codependency in modern language, what you might have heard, like people pleasing, is all codependency. Boundary setting is a part of understanding and becoming better with your codependency. But codependency is anytime that you lose yourself in a relationship dynamic. So if you're having unhealthy relationships where you neglect yourself, that's codependency. So I'll give you a clear example. If you lie about anything in order for you to look good to another person, that's codependent. If you give up all of the healthy things that you do for yourself to make sure that somebody else likes you or is interested in you, that's codependency. If you live in denial about somebody else's interest in you, that's codependency. Codependency can also look like accepting sex when you really want love, so that's codependency. Basically, it's whenever you're using somebody else to fill a void within inside of yourself. So, like, again, it's so broad, the theme of codependency, but ultimately it's about looking at your relationship dynamics that you're having with other people and seeing where you're not being fully honest, where you're not being fully authentic, and where maybe you're trying to control somebody else in your behavior.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm super excited to get more into that, but let's talk about your story, starting with how you grew up. But I guess I'm super keen to learn more about it, because I guess what I know from having met you and having listened to some of your podcasts is that you kind of had this massive change in your life where you were living in the US, you were engaged, I think like 2 months away from getting married, you were, you kind of had this moment when I think it was like you realized your career wasn't aligned, where you were living wasn't aligned, and then also the relationship wasn't aligned, and you called this wedding off and moved countries and like started a new life almost, which is a massive transition, obviously, but it seems like for the you know, it seems like now you're doing the work you were meant to do and you're on the path you're meant to be on, and you I'm like, love your TikToks. I'm so in awe of them. And I don't know, it's just like you're like radiating this energy that's like amazing, but that's obviously a massive journey to go on. So yeah, super interested to unpack it, but let's start with how you grew up. I'm sure people are already like trying to unpick where your accent's from.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That's so kind. I grew up in the north of England, so in North Yorkshire. There's me and I'm one of, basically, to make it easy, I have five brothers. My parents got divorced when I was, I think, 2 or 3 years old, and they both met their now current partners by the time I was 5. And I have one real brother and then 4 stepbrothers between the families. And so I grew up just kind of like, these are just all my brothers. And yeah, definitely my parents' divorce affected me way more than what I realized. And I didn't really realize that until like the past few years of going deep into my shadow and understanding, and also looking at my codependency and where that comes from. And yeah, so I grew up in the north of England with a really big family. My mum's also one of 3, and I have lots of cousins, and we're very close as a family. And to me, family is very important. I'm also a Cancer sun, and Cancer rising. And so I'm just very affected by emotion and family and home and nurturing. And so that has always been important to me. And so, yeah, I grew up in my hometown. I stayed in my hometown until I was 16. And then I moved to the south of England. I went to dance school for 3 years. And that was a really big thing because none of my friends were doing that. I didn't know anybody else who was doing that. All of my friends were going to the college in my hometown. And for some reason, I decided to move like 500 miles away from my family and go to dance school, not knowing anybody. And so that, I think, was my first big kind of leap of faith. And I've been doing that kind of a lot, like ever since, of just kind of like uprooting and moving and like taking a risk and discovering new places and new ways of being and trial and erroring things. And so I lived with a host family for like 2 years, which was really beautiful. And then I lived with friends for a year. And
What
then I moved to London.
what type
Yeah,
of dance were you doing?
everything. So like we would dance all day, every day. And so we would do like ballet, we'd do tap, we'd do jazz, we'd do commercial dance, we'd do partner dance. Like it was literally everything. We did singing, we did acting, we did musical theatre. Um, it was very physical and
And you were really
fun,
good
but
at
that was actually, I wouldn't say that I was really good at it. I think I was good, obviously, compared to like an average person. Obviously, I had dance skills, and obviously, I was practicing all day, every day for 3 years, so I had to be good at it. But I wasn't ever really the best dancer. I definitely wasn't the best in my school. I didn't get a solo in my graduation show. I never really was put at the front that much. But I was really good at acting, and I was really good at musical theatre. And I really loved dancing. Now, when I look at it, I understand that I love dancing because I love emoting. I love expression. I love like art and like feeling. And I think, sometimes we'd be in jazz class and we'd have like, let's say, like an Adele song for this dance routine. And it's obviously emotion and you're throwing yourself around and you're actually letting yourself feel. And I think so much of my life, like my upbringing was suppressed, like my feeling was suppressed. And so within dance, it was like my opportunity to move through my body and to, yeah, express and to feel. And obviously the more that you kind of like felt the movement and felt the song and the lyrics, the better the dance would become because people would enjoy that performance. That's what performance really is seeing somebody in an expression.
Mm.
So I think that that's the element that I liked about it the most, but unaware at the time.
And why do you think it was suppressed growing up? Was it just that's what Yorkshire's like, or was it your family, or?
Yeah, I think a mix of both. I think I mean, I don't want to stereotype my hometown, but I don't think it's not very like a feely place. There's quite a lot of like northern banter, which is like passive aggressive. We don't really say like, oh, I'm really proud of you. Well, people do say that, but like it's not very often that you praise somebody else or you celebrate somebody else. It's always like kind of like a backhanded compliment. And that's how, people give love there. I don't think they have this vulnerability to be able to say what they actually mean. And I also think in my family, I'm surrounded by boys who didn't express their emotions very much. And I don't think my parents knew how to teach us to express our emotions. I didn't really witness them expressing their emotions a lot. And it never really was encouraged. I used to get very like, I used to, what my grandma would call a tantrum. Like I used to have these tantrums where I'd like, have this massive buildup of anger and like frustration. And it would just come out by me like hysterically crying and like throwing a fit. And in those moments, what I recognize is, or what I remember is being told to stop, like stop having a tantrum, or she's throwing a fit, or here she goes again. And it was never like, what do you need in this moment, or what's this about, or what's coming up. It was just like, oh, this is so embarrassing, or like sort yourself out. And I think because of that, I didn't know how to handle my emotions, and so I would just suppress them a lot. I remember when I first moved back home from my breakup, and I was so emotional. And I moved back in with my parents, and my two of my brothers were there at the time. We were all having dinner together, and I'd seen something that my ex had shared, and it really, triggered me. And we just sat down to have dinner, and I couldn't like stop, like I just started crying, and nobody knew what to do. Like my brothers like stared at their meal. They were like, "Don't look at her, like she's crying." And my mom looked at me and she said, "Do you want to go to your room?" And I remember that so clearly because it was this moment of like nobody knows how to handle emotion, and it's like because I'm feeling something I should go and hide and fix it and sort it out and come back once it's gone, because this is embarrassing, or maybe I should feel embarrassed about it, or I should feel shame. And I sat there and I let myself be witnessed in those tears and that sadness, and I didn't try and shut it down. And maybe they felt uncomfortable about it, but it was quite like a moment of me just acknowledging and accepting my mess and my emotion and my feeling. So yeah, I would say
That's
definitely.
I was smiling when you were saying the tantrum bit because that was me as well, and it was like famous in the family. And also like I feel like I was really shamed for it. It was like Julie was always throwing tantrums. When now I look back on it, I'm like, that's a fucking 4-year-old. Like I'm not gonna like take accountability for like what a 4-year-old obviously needed something. That's why they were behaving like that.
Right.
But then that's so weird. Yeah. I had such a similar moment of a breakup, or probably many similar moments of just like crying, and people do feel so uncomfortable. But yeah, I had that same at a dinner table. But it's like, I don't know what you needed in that moment, but for me, it's like I needed like, like support, like someone to be like, are you okay? Or like, I see you like this, like obviously you're in a ton of pain. And like that person doesn't need to do anything, but just to kind of like acknowledge that you're there and it's okay. But I guess, yeah, we're not necessarily taught these things, and people don't know how to respond.
Right, exactly that. Yeah, that's literally exactly how I felt. And I don't know if I really needed anything in that moment other than just like, I think I just needed to let it out. Like I needed to stop like hiding that and like pretending that I was okay and that this was not a hurtful situation. And I was the one who chose the breakup. And so I think sometimes when you choose the breakup, people think, oh well, she's going to be fine because she chose this. And it's like, no, there's still so much feeling here and sadness here and loss here and grief and all of the things. So yeah, I think I just needed to be witnessed in that moment, and nobody knew how to do that.
Yeah. And then, so how did you end up in the US, or what was your path after dance school?
Yeah, so I moved to London for a year, and I lived in Shoreditch in this like tiny little flat with two other people, and my bedroom was like the living room. They had to walk through to get to the kitchen. And it was just so exciting at the time. I was 19, and I was working in a nightclub, and I was also running, I just started my first online business. I was doing like a health and wellness business. And I went to this event, and my now ex, he was speaking at the event, and we connected. And he invited me to go on a date, and he was American. And I said, no, I'm like too busy working my business and like doing my life. And he was like, okay, do you want to do like a business event with me? And I was like, yeah, of course, because I was just so focused on business. And so we planned this event, and he was supposed to invite people, and he didn't invite anybody. So we ended up going on a date, and it was just really sweet. And so we went on our first date, and we just got on really well. And then, yeah, like we went traveling for like a year, and then I ended up moving to New York with him when I was 21, or like just 21, maybe 20.
What
No, it was 21. Yeah, 21.
So what were you motivated by when you moved to London? You were just like, I'm gonna figure out how to make money, or you were really into wellness, or how did you end up there? And which nightclub?
um, well, I moved to London because it was like, okay, I've been dancing. Now I'm going to go to London and start doing auditions. So I was doing auditions. I auditioned and got like accepted for Disneyland Paris and like different things, and was doing all of that kind of work. But I also just wasn't actually that fulfilled or excited about it. And so I don't think I ever pursued it the way that I should have if I was interested in it that much, or the way that I think that I would have if I was, because I'm quite self motivated, and the fact that I wasn't like putting myself forward for things was quite alarming. Um, that was my intention going there, but never really pursued into anything. And I worked at the Queen of Hoxton.
Fun. What were you doing there?
Well, waitressing, like drinking a lot of tequila, like getting drunk, sleeping with guys, like just being wild and 19.
Got it.
Sorting myself out.
Huh. So then was that just kind of an adventure going to the US? Or were you particularly focused on anything at that point? Or you were like, okay, the dance thing isn't working out. Like, let's see where life takes me.
Oh, I was just codependent. Like, I was so codependent. It was just like him. Anything that he's doing, I'm doing. Like, we're enmeshed at this point. Like, I didn't even have a real sense of self at this point. I didn't think at all, like, oh, should I give up my dance career or not? It was like obvious. Like, I've met this man. Of course, I'm going to like move country, give up my entire life, be with him. But I didn't know any better at that time. And yeah, I was highly codependent and highly in love as well. Like, I really loved this man, and we had a lot of fun together, and we were very happy. And so yeah, I just was like, fuck it, like why not? And also like great opportunity, like move to New York City. When do you ever get the opportunity to do that? So
this is so funny because I also moved to New York when I was maybe 21 or 22, also because I was in love with an American guy. And
oh my
exactly
God.
as you're explaining, like I think I was studying engineering, but I was like, I'm just going to go there in a gap year and whatever. And people like, I don't think like people take gap years and live in Manhattan. And then I was like, okay, fine, I'll get a job over there. But it's so funny now in interviews. It's like, oh, how did you, like your first job was in New York? And it's like, yeah, because I was just wanted to move there for a guy, and I ended up working finance, and that's how it happened. Like, that's just the truth of it. There was no like,
Oh
I'm
my
so
God.
driven to go and work in New York. But yeah, it was like, it's like, what a city to move to, right?
Yeah, and like, whether you do it intentionally or whether you do it for a guy, like nothing is wrong, obviously. And we learn so much from those things, and it's just directing us to, I mean, it directed you to your career and, all of that growth and everything that you've had from there. And for me, it was massive in my own growth and my own understanding and experience and connections and friendships and becoming, it was my early 20s. I spent all of them in New York, and yeah, it was monumental for me.
Mm-hmm. And is he from New York?
No, he's from Las Vegas.
Got it. But he was living there.
He wasn't. So when I met him, he was still living in Las Vegas, and I moved to Las Vegas for like a couple of months, like on and off because of visa things. And then we both decided to move to New York together. So we both moved there and we actually lived in an Airbnb for 7 months because we were supposed to just go there for 7 months because he was going to gemology school to study like diamonds and gemstones, really cool course. And that was kind of like, we just thought we were going to go for 7 months. So we just got this Airbnb, and then we ended up loving it. And like you do in New York, I feel like you say, okay, I'm going to leave this year. And then, your lease comes to the end and you're like, okay, just one more year. And so we would do that. And we ended up being there for 4 years. And then the pandemic hit, and that just kind of like uprooted everything.
Mm-hmm. And where were you living in New York?
So we were living in Queens. So we lived in Long Island City. So we lived right on the riverfront.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. And you like had a great time in New York, were like working and like happy as far as you know it?
I had a love-hate relationship with New York. I definitely, days where I'd be like, I love living here. This is amazing. The city is full of endless opportunities. I love my friends. I love my lifestyle. I had an online business, so it was very flexible. I was working from cafes with my friends. I was running fun like yoga events on my rooftop and doing really fun things. And I was traveling quite a lot for work as well to like different states and stuff. And I love that, but I don't know, particularly now, like I think well, it was expensive, of course, so that was like stressing me out. And I had this victim mentality towards being there because I used to say to my ex, which is not okay. I used to be like, "You're the only reason I'm here," or "I'm only doing this for you," and I don't get to see my family, and like I was using him as like blame for so many things and like holding that against him when obviously this is my decision. I'm here, like nobody's forcing me to do anything. And I think that I would like feel resentment towards New York because I wasn't like seeing my family. And so then I would like bring that into my relationship. And that would just cause like a bit of like angst against the city because it wasn't like home and like my family weren't there and all of that.
Yeah. But was your family supportive of you otherwise?
Yeah, my family was so supportive. In fact, I never even remember them questioning any of these decisions.
Got it. Okay, so then what happened when the pandemic started?
Mm. So just before the pandemic hit, we came to Portugal, me and my ex, because we were getting married in Portugal. We had our wedding planned. It was supposed to be in June 2020. And so we'd just come to Portugal. We'd finished all of our final details with the wedding planner at the venue and everything. We fly back to New York, and the next day the borders shut and the pandemic hits. And we soon realized that we would need to postpone our wedding. And so we postponed our wedding to the following year. And that was really upsetting and kind of devastating and just felt painful and like frustrating. And then basically some stuff happened with inside of him and his family, and we ended up packing up our flat in New York and moving to Las Vegas. So we drove cross country with our dog to Las Vegas and moved into a spare house that his family had there, and we lived in the spare house. And I really didn't want to go. I felt really happy in my New York flat and like safe there and happy there, but I didn't have my own voice really at that time to like say no, I'm not doing that. And so I just did what everybody else told me to do. And I also have this really beautiful quality of making any situation great. And so I was like, okay, if I'm going to be in Las Vegas, I'm not going to sit here and be mad about it. I'm going to like make the best of the situation. So we redecorated the house that we were in. or some of it like got like nicer furniture and made it feel like a home. I got a job because I didn't know anybody there. So I was like, okay, if I get a job, I'll meet some people and then hopefully I'll have some friends and I'm not just like in the house all the time. And I just needed to like get out of the house. So I got this job, even though I really didn't necessarily need it. And I ended up like really creating a nice, fun lifestyle. And he kind of depleted in the opposite way, and his mental health like went down. And so I would come home from work like joyous and happy and motivated and excited about life. And I was working on all of these new passion projects. I launched my own online, well, it was a physical product shop, but I was just running it online. And I launched a shop called With Meraki, and it was all about like intentional products and ceramics, and that I'd sourced from like independent artists. And I was creating this big brand about it and like running online events to like market it and collaborating with people and running virtual meditations and stuff. And so I would come home from my job and be excited to work on that. But as I would walk in the door, he would be, negative and would have had a bad day. And now I understand that he was struggling with depression and other things. And I would just like decline, like it just would really affect me. And so then I started like questioning different things, whether I wanted to be in the States anymore, if I wanted to live in England, if I wanted to be close to my family, if I wanted to do any of these businesses that I'd done before or that I'd created, if I wanted to be in this relationship. And that question of like, do I want to be in this relationship was the deeper question, and everything else I was like using to avoid that question and that decision. Like it wasn't about whether I want to be in the States or in England, but that's what I would like only bring to the table because that's what felt safest. And actually addressing the fact that I don't want to be in this relationship anymore, this isn't fully fulfilling to me anymore, or doesn't feel resonant for me anymore, was the scariest thing because of my codependency. And I kind of just felt like without him, without this life that we'd created, who am I? Like I didn't see my own gifts in that moment. I didn't see my own worth. I didn't see like how every place that I'd been, I'd always created something beautiful. Like I always thought that that was because of him. And so having to address that feeling or that conflicting feeling of like, do I stay in this relationship or not, was really, really scary and really intense and really painful. And so we had a few discussions about it, which took me like every ounce of courage that I had to even discuss it with him, after even having the courage to discuss it with myself. And then I came back to England for he suggested, which I actually thought was really great. He was like, why don't you just go home for like 6 weeks, see if you're homesick, and maybe you just need to be with family for a bit and then come back and we can see what's here. And I did that. I went home for like 3 weeks, and then I came to Portugal. My dad lives here. I'm currently in Portugal, and I was here for 10 days, I think. And then I went to Mallorca, and I had this desire, and I'd been working really with a coach, with two coaches, about understanding what desire is and reconnecting to my desire and reconnecting to my feminine energy and reconnecting to my truth and using my voice more, and also like my sensuality, which had all been very suppressed for my most of my life. And I had this desire come through, and it was like, go to Mallorca. And I don't know where it came from. I just kept seeing all the signs to go to Mallorca. I'd never seen Mallorca like this much before. And I told my ex, and he was like, why would you go to Mallorca? Like, we're in the middle of a pandemic. Like, you shouldn't just be flying around to different countries and, everyone's staying at home. Like, this is so irrational and irresponsible. And that's the thing with desire, that desire isn't about like what's the most safe and strategic thing to do. It's about what's in your heart and like what are you being called towards. And it doesn't always make sense, and it's often very conflicting and very painful and questionable. And I kind of suppressed the desire a little bit. And then I was on the phone with my dad one day, and he says to me, he's like, oh, whilst you're here, do you fancy going to Palma, which is in Mallorca? He was like, why don't we go to Palma for like 4 days? We could go on a little getaway trip, have a little holiday. And I was like, I cannot believe that you just said that. Like, was the wildest thing. And also it was this moment of permission for me to follow my desire, because as I was building up my own voice and my own courage to make a stand for myself, I didn't have that fully yet. And so the fact that my dad had initiated us to go to Mallorca felt a little bit more acceptable. And so I said yes. And on the back of the trip with my dad to Mallorca, I stayed for another 6 days by myself. And I paid for it by myself. I planned it by myself. I made friends. I drove. I like stayed in this really nice place. I did lots of things that I wanted to do. And that was my 6 days of liberation of like, holy shit, like I can trust myself. I can trust my desire. I can back myself. I can afford to do things. Like I'm the one that makes things fun. Like I create really great experiences for myself, and I can count on myself. And it makes me like so emotional just to like share that, because I didn't have that courage or that understanding or that perspective of myself. And I still didn't know after that trip whether I was going to go back and be in my relationship. In fact, every part of me wanted me to arrive back in Las Vegas and everything just be okay, and like me see my ex and be like, oh my God, what was I even thinking about? Of course I love you, like let's create a life together. But it was the opposite of that. Like as soon as I saw him, it was like, it's over. Like I just felt it fully in my body. And the next day we broke up, and that was just tumultuous and painful. And yeah, I'll stop there because that was a lot.
Yeah, I was just gonna say on that week. Oh yeah, so Mallorca, which is now you're moving there. Amazing.
Yeah.
But yeah, that week I feel like for some people they might listen to that and be like, I don't get it. What's the big deal? Like spending a week on your own, and set for you as well, because it's like you've moved like countries, you've done all this, like you've traveled a lot. For me, it was like the exact same, like to do something on my own for myself, like spend the money for myself, like make decisions for myself was the most terrifying thing. And as in, it's like this irrational fear, and people like totally don't get it because they're like, I thought you're super independent and like you live overseas. But I think it's that when you've always kind of been in a relationship and you've always, maybe as well, it's been modeled to you that women are always like dependent on someone else is paying for them, someone else is helping make decisions. Like to actually do it on your own is so empowering. And like, yeah, I don't know, for me it was just like my like inner child, it's just like so much fear, like it doesn't trust that I can do it, and then it's like showing that it can, and you're just like creating this amazing relationship with yourself.
Oh my God, 100%. Yeah, it's really, I've done the same. Like I traveled so much, but mostly for work or to like visit family. And this was just like I have the intuitive pull to go there, not for work, not for profit, not for a reason not to visit anybody, but purely for desire and pleasure. And to give that to yourself and to be like, sorry, there's a little motorbike there. To give that to yourself and to, yeah, just let yourself revel in something is like so liberating. And yeah, I just remember like it sounds so simple, but I remember like being on the beach and I was obviously by myself, and I I like to think that I have like open energy and like I feel magnetic a lot of the time. And there was this couple there, and I just smiled at them. Oh no, this woman had really nice earrings. And I was like, I really like your earrings. And she was like, oh my God, thank you so much. And then we got talking, and next minute me and her, like, we went cliff jumping. And the act of like jumping off the cliff was so relevant to the period that I was on in my life. And for me, I had always had all of these desires to do things, but I needed so much encouragement of somebody to like push me. Like I would say to my ex or to my parents or to people like, oh, I really want to do, and I still do this now. I'm like, oh, I really want to do XYZ. And rather than me like initiating myself into doing that thing and pursuing that thing and making it happen, I would need my ex to be like, okay, well, let's plan it and let's put it together, and or like hold my hand like every step of the way. And it was like, okay, nobody's doing that for me in this moment. I'm doing that. I'm saying, like, this is what I want to do. Okay, so you want to do it. So what does that look like? Let's book the first thing. Let's choose the next thing. Let's make the conversation. Let's jump off the cliff. Like, let's get in the car. Like, just so many different things where it wasn't anyone else holding my hand. It was like me with me pursuing things for me. And I think that's what was most liberating about it.
Amazing. And so what was that like after the breakup then, when you'd kind of trusted yourself of like, this is not my path and I'm going to like, jump off this cliff? How was like the following year after that?
Excruciating, like so painful, very conflicting, like there would be moments where I'm like, I'm so proud of myself and I had so much support. I thankfully had a coach and I had a therapist and I have a beautiful family who were all making a stand for my happiness. Like they all loved my ex and they loved our relationship, and our relationship was not awful. And to leave it, I was really nervous that they'd be all mad at me. Like they'd be like, what are you doing? Are you crazy? Like, what's going on? And they just kept saying to me that your happiness is the most important thing. So do whatever's going to make you happy. And, in that year, there was a lot of happiness. I did a lot of fun things, but there was a lot of sadness. And there was a lot of times where I was like, what am I doing? Like, what have I done? Because I had gone from living in this luxury apartment in New York City, planning my dream destination wedding, and like having all of these friends flying in from all over the country, having our dog together, being in this like from the outside beautiful relationship, everything that I was taught growing up that you should have on paper, I was accomplishing. We were planning on, probably getting our first house after the wedding, probably having a baby the next year. And I'd given all that up, and next thing I'm living in my childhood bedroom in my parents' house, given up my business. Like I had basically barely any income coming in. I'd spent all of my money on moving back to the States and getting my dog to come back with me. And I just was really starting from scratch and I was really lost. And so there was definitely these feelings of like, why the hell would you do that? Like, why would you leave this on paper great life because you have this other desire to be, ultimately I didn't share this, but I knew that something was off in the relationship, but I had this desire to be single. I really wanted to be single and I really wanted to date. And I know exactly why now, but like at the time it didn't make sense because I was I was due to get married. Why do I now want to be single and like date? And I was 25 when this was happening, for context. And although I had that desire, I also had this like massive fear of, what if I'm single forever? Or, I should probably start having children by the time I'm 28. And so, like, if I stay on this trajectory, like, I'm going to be on track and I'm going to do what society approves of. And, like, I'm going to have it all figured out and it's going to be all golden and shiny and beautiful from, standard ticking boxes. And so, yeah, that year was a lot of me like really holding myself and trusting in God and building a relationship with God and spirituality and desire and intuition and getting to know myself better. And that's when I discovered breathwork. That's why I started doing breathwork regularly every single week. That's when I did my breathwork training, certification. And I think that I needed that period of time that I spent a lot of time in the dark, like in my childhood bedroom, like sleeping and crying and holding myself and breathing and taking my dog for long walks in the countryside and on the beach and just being surrounded by family. I needed all of that time to just pause and breathe and stop and bring like a lot of awareness to patterns and behaviors that I had that hadn't served me up until this point. And if I'd have, and I mean, there's so much that I could share on this of like my codependency, because this is where it started to become really present for me. But yeah, that year was just intense and like felt really slow at the same time.
As in codependent patterns with family.
Yep. And in terms of relating with men, my first awareness of my codependency was I was living back at home, and I mean, I should have become already aware of my codependency because of this breakup and the whole relationship, but I couldn't see that because when you're codependent, you usually can't see things because you're in denial. My first awareness was I was in this group coaching program, and they had a retreat happening in LA in April, and I really wanted to go. And I was also running the social media for this company. And I was on the phone with them one night, and I was like, oh, I really have this desire to go. And their whole coaching program is about like making a stand for your desire. And they were like, well, why can't you go? Like, what's stopping you? Like, I literally couldn't ask my parents to like look after my dog for me, or like I was so afraid of telling them that I was thinking about going on a retreat because like, one, I probably shouldn't be spending money because I'm making not very much money at the moment. Two, like, should I be really flying to America in the middle of the pandemic? And I was unvaccinated, and they were all vaccinated, and like we had just had different perspective on that, and there was just like a lot of fear around things. And so it was just like I didn't dare tell them because I codependently was so afraid of their judgment on me, and that they might shame me or think that this is, you know, stupid to do and that I'm dumb and all of this. And my coach just looked at me and she said, it sounds like this is codependency. And I was like, oh, really? Because I didn't understand codependency at the time. And she suggested that I go to like a Codependence Anonymous 12-step program. And I was so confronted by that idea. And I ended up going to this retreat, and I ended up starting Codependence Anonymous in that November, so November 2021. And I've been going every week ever since. And I have a sponsor, and I've worked the steps, and that's been a whole nother revelation in and of itself. But that's when I became aware of my codependency with my parents. And then from there, I started noticing my codependency that was playing out in friendships, in relationships, in dating, and in work, in every area of my life, really.
Oh, it's so interesting because, yeah, I had similar like codependent patterns, but of course like had no idea. I remember the first time one of my best friends sent me this like definition of codependency, and she was like, yeah, I think you might be codependent, this is what it is. And I was like, no, that's definitely not me. And it's just like you slowly realize like, oh, hang on a sec. But then as you break the pattern, it's crazy to look at other people who are doing similar things, like as you describe in the examples at the start, but also stuff like, yeah, like needing their parents' approval. Like they want to like quit their job and they're like 30 years old, but they are like having an argument with their parents about it. But yeah. And it's like they need it from their parents. Like they must have their parents agree that it's the right decision, when it's like it's not their life. Like you're 30, like you get to make this. Like of course ask for their advice, and like of course you want your parents to be proud of you and to like feel supported by the people around you. But it's this like grasping thing that it's like, you know, or needing like your parent, like just way too much involvement from them about stuff that it's like, why are you telling them that detail of like an intimate relationship you have or something like that? And then as well with dating, it's so classic when you see those patterns and you're like, oh my God, that used to be me. Like, yeah, making up, like obsessing over someone or making up a story. And from the outside, it's like, no, like, it's very hard to tell someone because, yeah, if they don't have awareness of it, it's just hard to get through. So I guess for you in coaching, it's like people are at the point when they realize it's a problem.
Yeah, usually when you begin, like if you're hiring a coach or if you're going to a program, like a 12-step program, or you're working with a therapist on this, you usually got to the point of, I've tried doing things by myself and it's not working. Like I'm not getting any further along with it. And maybe, you're listening to this and you're feeling the same way. And that's why you're like listening to a podcast and you're looking for advice and steps and understanding of how you can break your codependency or you can become a better person. And doing it alone is really challenging because you have no accountability and because you've been living out these patterns all your life and you've been taught by your parents or by family or by society that this is the right thing to do. And so that's just what you're doing. And so you don't know any different. So you need somebody to reflect back to you and be like, hey, look, this pattern or this belief that you need to show up in a certain way or that you think that this is you being helpful is not actually true. Like you're doing this for other reasons, underlying factors. And it's in those moments, in those reflections from a coach or from, a support group or from a friend even, where you can be like, oh shit, like that just felt so normal to me because that's been my behavior for my entire life. And then once you have that awareness, then you can choose something different. But again, like if you don't know any different, you need somebody to kind of guide you and be like, this is what you can do instead. This is safe for you to do. This is allowed for you to do. And I think in my practice, particularly, it's, we incorporate breath into that because your nervous system gets into that fight or flight state when it's so fearful to make the comment or choose yourself or go against what your parents said or speak up a desire in dating, which or a boundary or any of those things. If that feels really unsafe for you, using your breath just to regulate and come back to yourself and be like, it's okay for me to do this, it's safe for me to do this, like I'm supported in this decision or in these words. And using that is where the healing happens. And every time you do something and you break a pattern, it becomes a little bit easier to do it the next time that pattern arises because you have the awareness and because you have the evidence that you survived when you broke the pattern before.
Yeah, because for a lot of it, I feel like that's, or like a super common pattern, and that kind of everyone seems to be aware of, is this like grasping thing in dating when someone like, yeah, they're holding on to, I mean, I feel like it can be quite obvious from the outside that it's like, okay, that person isn't interested, or like or they're not worth your time. Yeah, like the film, he's not that into you, but it's kind of like, it's either like he's, or it's like whatever it is, his behavior isn't good enough, or whoever the person is, like their behavior, like the way you are suffering right now is like you deserve so much more than that to be stuck in this situation. But for the person, it's like actual life or death. It's like, I need to know, like this date needs to happen, that they're like suddenly not responding to me, or like I need to know that they think this way, and then it's like all the analysis, like getting everyone to read the text, like what do you think, like how do you think he feels about me or she or whoever.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, it's like trying to get this need met from outside when actually it's like, that's why also, because if people can't access therapy or coaching or whatever, or that sounds like so scary, it's like, your videos, and there's lots of resources out there, like books and whatever, that explains these things, and then you kind of get comfort from that video. And yeah, some of your videos like reminding people that it comes from, I mean, obviously you can explain it way better, but it's like it comes from within, like whatever you're seeking from outside, it's like you need to give that to yourself. Like, why is your worth dependent on whether this guy replies to your text? It's like, what's that about?
Oh my God. Yeah. Oh my God. I'm like not laughing, but I had a little laugh because I empathize with this pattern so much. This has been a huge one for me where I can sit for hours in the cycle of like, doing something and then picking up my phone if they messaged yet, doing something, picking up, or like sat on my phone, jumping from app to app, like trying, like seeing if they've messaged yet. And I'm like lost in this place of waiting for the next hit to come, waiting for that message to come through. And as soon as the message comes through, I would have this sense of relief of like, oh, okay, I'm safe again. Like he's still into me. And if the message didn't come, or in that space of waiting for the message, it would be like, oh my God, am I unlovable? Am I unbeautiful? Am I undesirable? Like, am I always going to be single? Am I a mess? Like, what did I say that made him not like me anymore? Like, what was my outfit not good enough? Like, all of those thoughts that would cycle through my head in that in between was exactly what I needed to look at. And that was my medicine that was needed to be like, okay, so I'm sitting in low self worth. Ultimately, codependency is low self-worth because you're disrespecting yourself, you're not seeing your value. And so that's what you're saying with like it being so obvious that somebody's not into you, but you're still attached onto them and you're trying to manipulate them into believing that you're the greatest person and that they should definitely be with you, and whether they think it or see it or not, and whether they're actually the person that you even want to be with, which is probably not, if you're 100% honest with yourself. If you were able to be fully clear, which is the goal, to get into a state of awareness, into a state of regulation, into such a state of self-worth, you would be able to see this person, be like, is that the kind of guy that I want to be in a relationship with? Is he showing up for me in the ways that I want to be provided for? And clearly he's not. If he's not doing all of those things that we're kind of talking about briefly here. Then you get to make that decision. And when you're not anxiously attached and when you're in a state of healthy codependency, you're able to be like, okay, I love myself enough, I value myself enough to walk away from this because I trust that I can have what it is that I desire. And I value myself so much that I'm willing to walk away from something that isn't that, in the faith that I can have something that is. And even if I don't end up with that thing, I'm not going to sit here and stay in that cycle of like, is he into me? Can I manipulate him? Can I control him? Because your nervous system is going to get absolutely shot, and you're so deserving of being grounded and calm and magnetic and in your own confidence and in your own state of certainty and stability and groundedness in your value. And so every time we give that away to somebody else, and what I say a lot in my videos and work is, whenever you put somebody else on a pedestal, so you're saying your mom has all of the opinions or all of the right answers, or this guy, if he loves you, then you're lovable. If your friend invites you to the disco on Saturday night, then you must be a good friend or cool enough. Like every time we make somebody else's actions or decisions higher than our own, or if they do something, then we've put somebody above ourselves. And nobody is above you and nobody is below you. We're all just equal human beings who are living out, our behaviors and our patterns and our beliefs and all of that. And so it's really about coming back into yourself and being like, what do I need to remind myself? What's my truth? What am I deserving of? What am I capable of? What am I forgetting right now? And can I remind myself that and just come back into center?
And so what was that process like for you, breaking those patterns? Like, did you have to go through lots of dating situations?
So the reason why I said that, I had this desire to be single and to date, and at the time it made absolutely no sense, but now it makes so much sense because it was through dating that I I'm definitely not codependent, because I think, well, codependency is a disease, it's an addiction. And like with substance where you're addicted to alcohol, with codependency you're addicted to people. So like you're getting your high by somebody messaging you, or by somebody liking you, or by somebody valuing you or approving of you. And so it's an actual addiction. And so I don't think that I'll ever be fully non-codependent. And, it always feels good for somebody to give you a compliment anyway. And I think that that's part of human nature to receive that. And it's a human need. But my journey with dating has really, really helped me heal my behaviors with putting men on pedestals, with being in denial about the truth of situations, with like actually saying, oh no, I'm not free tonight because I already have plans. Whereas in the past, I'd just give up all my plans and like, if he's free, I'm free. And just so many different behaviors. Like, this is really embarrassing. But when I first left my relationship, I immediately jumped into dating because of my attachment with men and because I'd put so much of my value in, if I'm in a relationship, then I must be lovable and then I must be desirable. And if I'm not, then like, oh my God, I must be ugly. I must be uncool. I must, just all of these things. And so I immediately looked to men to fill that void again. And there was this one time when I was in my hometown and I was chatting with this guy, and I would drive around my hometown hoping to bump into him. Like I would literally go to where I knew that he was potentially going to be working that day, and like maybe I'd accidentally bump into him. I would like drive by his house like multiple times a day because maybe he might see me and he might remember that I'm like cool and like beautiful, and it might remind him to message me. And I would like look on Facebook and see like when he was last active and like make all of my judgments about myself based upon him responding to me or like initiating things. And I was just in denial about his availability and making all of his availability mean something about me. And that's just like not the case at all. I do not chase after men ever anymore. I'm able to willingly express my feelings and my desires and be able to say, I'm really into you, and not pretend that I'm not, and like not play this like cool girl like game going on of, oh well, play hard to get. But I also don't give up my own needs and my own desires and my own boundaries within inside of relating with men, because I respect and value myself enough to make myself my own priority. And honestly, doing that anyway has made me have the most abundant, beautiful, intimate relationships with men, way beyond anything that I have ever experienced or knew about. And just viewing, relating and dating in such a different light.
And then your life must be so much more fulfilled as well, right? Because then you're like, when you shift, I feel like at the start you might, you kind of have to fake it. It's like, okay, you can't be available all the time. You have to have other stuff on. But then when you're like, actually, like, this is what I care about, the other stuff, like my career, like my interests, my friends, and it's no longer like you're faking it. It's just like, oh, wow, my life is like so full, and like men are a great part of it, but they're not the entire thing that everything depends on.
Right. Yeah, exactly. There's just a lot more calm and like serenity than the chaos that I used to put myself through. But I kind of was addicted to the chaos at the same time, like that's just the game that I knew, and so that's what I thought it needed to look like. And I felt like if I didn't have to fight for some man's attention, then like what's the point? I didn't know that it's okay. Like if somebody was interested in me, like healthy interest, I would make them wrong because I was so used to having to fight for somebody's love and attention, that when somebody was just giving it to me, it felt like they must be weird or there must be something wrong with him, or like why would he want to do this? And it was me having to learn to receive love and attention and acceptance and holding and all of that as well. And yeah, definitely, like there's a lot more peace in my life and presence in my life, and it's not now like either a man or friends and a career. It's now like, oh, I have friends and a career, and like if there is somebody who I'm into or I want to pursue, I can bring that in without like completely losing everything else and everything else going like off the rails.
Mm-hmm. And what do you feel is the most powerful way that you're able to help your clients?
Ah, I think because of my journey with codependency, I do not rescue my clients. So I think what makes a good coach is somebody who like actually says it how it is, with love and compassion, of course. But I won't sit there and like rescue my clients. You know, if they're like, oh, he did this and he said that and I'm blah, 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 I am willing to not be like the friend and like the constant rescuer who what we're all used to, which is the friend who's like, oh well, you know, yeah, he's wrong and like you're gonna be okay and like you've done nothing wrong and like who is he to do this and blah blah blah. I will sit there and hold that person to taking a look at their side of things and being able to reflect and hold them through recognizing that, and doing so with such love and compassion towards themselves. So it's not from a place of shame and judgment, but it's a place of like, wow, if I can take radical self responsibility, then I get to create serenity and peace and excitement and pleasure and joy and love in my life. But every single time when I'm still putting the blame outside of me or I'm pointing fingers, I'm never going to make the progress that I want, because I'm not looking, or my client or myself is not looking at our part in things. So I think what makes me a good coach is my willingness to not be like just fluff, but actually reflect back the truth or what I'm seeing in somebody's behavior or pattern. And sometimes we just need that like loving holding and somebody to be brutally honest with us. And I also will say, like, I think one of the things that I'm really good at as a coach or a friend or, yeah, a family member is acceptance. Like, I have had to give myself so much acceptance, like moving through stuff and like not shaming myself for actions that I've done or lies that I've told or behaviors like me driving around trying to find this guy and just like not being like, oh my God, I'm so dumb or that's so, you know, ugly, but just being like, oh my God, I love the little girl in me who was so hurt and like so badly wanted to be loved. And I can like bring acceptance to myself. And because I've done that so much, like anything that anybody tells me in session, in breath work, in, you know, personal life, I would never like laugh or shame or judge somebody. It's just like, thank you for sharing with me. Like, I'm so grateful that I can be a safe enough space for you to let that out and clear that out, because that's all we need most of the time, is just to have a place to admit something and be met with love. And that's where most of the healing happens. And so I would like to say that I'm really good at that. And I do feel like I hold space for a lot of acceptance for people. Yeah.
And are you generally pretty fortunate with clients who are willing to look at themselves and do the work and like whilst being guided and accepting the compassion and everything from you, but they, because I feel like that's the thing I would struggle the most if I was a coach, if it's like someone's, I mean, I guess they're paying the money, so it's like otherwise they're kind of just wasting their own time, right, if they're not going to do the work.
Right, there needs to be, that's why you pay for a coach, because you've got to have some kind of stake in the ground. But not only that, we usually, when somebody's coaching, they've decided that they want to create change. And we'll have a look at the beginning of coaching together, like, where are you at right now? And like, how would you like your life to look like? And what do you desire in your life? Like, if you're fully honest, and what's not working, and let's take a look at that. So if they have a clear enough motivation of like where they want to get to and what they desire, then looking at yourself and taking radical responsibility becomes a little bit easier. But I think as a coach or a friend or anybody, it's remembering that I'm not in control of somebody else's outcome. Like, I can only reflect back, I can only hold space, I cannot do the work for that person. And so I detach myself from the results that they get, because ultimately that's not my plan, that's God's plan, that's their plan. Like, they're on their own journey, and whether that means that they change one behavior in this time that we work together or whether they change their complete life, like, that's good enough, and that's beautiful, and that's exactly what was needed in this time together. And I actually find that so much of the coaching and the awareness comes from the practice that you're in yourself, like noticing, where am I avoiding coming to the call? Okay, what else am I avoiding in my life? If I'm numbing out by, eating before the call, or like feeling like I need to be doing something constantly, where am I also doing that in my own life? And so much of the talking, if somebody's lying to me on the call and they become aware of that, like, where else are you lying in your life? Like, if you're not feeling comfortable to share your truth with me, where else are you not feeling comfortable to share your truth? So the call and the process together gets to be an initiation into the awareness of where this is also happening in their everyday life.
So interesting. And yeah, I think I heard you say that on another podcast about you were asking for someone's advice, or someone you were working with, that it was like you wanted the answer from them, like, should you end this relationship? And then you're so grateful that they didn't give you an answer, because then you could have blamed them. And I think that's so often how it goes with this advice thing, that especially with the guy and the text, and people give advice like, oh no, like, you should just text him again. And like, I'm sure, and that something like as simple as that to way bigger things, it's like taking, you're not taking the responsibility, you're not listening to your inner voice, or to whatever your intuition, or to sit with the discomfort and take accountability for, like, no, this is my life. Like, it's like, of course, again, like, get advice from people, talk it through with people, but they can't make decisions for you. And often it is, especially with guys, it's like the worst advice. They're like, yeah, text him again. And then you're like, I so regret sending that text message.
Oh my God, seriously. Like, I'm the friend who is like not available for bullshit. Like, I'm not going to tell you, oh, he was probably busy, or like, oh, I probably didn't mean that. I'm like, that's exactly what, what he said is what he's meant. So, like, let's, it doesn't mean anything about you, because so often we're trying to protect our friends' feelings, right? We're like, oh, he probably didn't text you because he's doing something for work, and so like it's not about you because you're amazing and you're beautiful. Well, we already know that, right? We already know that our friends are beautiful and amazing, and maybe this guy isn't into them, and maybe that's the reality, and that's okay. It doesn't mean that she isn't now beautiful and deserving and all of those things just because this one guy isn't into her. He might just have different preferences, the same as like I have different preferences in men. I might meet one man and it's not my type of guy, or like his interests don't align with mine, or our values are different. Doesn't mean that it doesn't mean he's a bad person, right? So we've got to remember that in our own perspective in dating. And just going back to your point about me wanting my friend to give me the answer of like whether to leave the relationship or not, I just love that situation so much, because it is such evidence of codependency of, okay, well, me valuing somebody else's opinion or judgment or perspective over my own. And we've got to remember that, I've lived with myself for 28 years. I've maybe known my friend for 5 years. And out of those 5 years, they've spent 40 hours with me. Like, they don't know me, they don't know my feelings, they don't know my reaction, they don't know my needs, they don't know my pain, they don't know my triggers, they don't know all of those things that's going on, all of the thoughts that are going on inside. They don't know the full situation, they only know the highlights that I've told them from this dynamic. And that's why it's got to come back to you, like sitting with yourself and being like, what feels right for me? Like, how does this feel in my body? Am I feeling good about this? Can I trust my intuition? Can I lean into that? Can I value my own judgment? And strengthening that over time. And yeah, then you can't blame your friends, and you're taking radical responsibility, because you're the one who's going to have to live with that decision and for the rest of your life. So you might as well sit with yourself and make the decision that feels right for you.
Amazing. Okay, before we wrap up, what are you up to now, and where can people find you or find out more?
Yeah. So I currently have spacing for codependency coaching. So if you are looking for a coach, if you maybe recognize yourself in some of these behaviors or these topics that we've just spoken about, and you're like, okay, I'm ready to work through that and actually come back into connection with myself and start changing these behaviors and cultivating healthy relationships, then you can reach out to me. I coach people for 12 weeks minimum, and we dive into all of this stuff and see what's not working. Or you can come to my breathwork sessions. I run like a virtual breathwork session every single month. And I also do private one on one breathwork sessions. And they're really powerful because you get to feel through things. So if talking isn't right for you, like if you don't want to address things, sometimes we can just shift it somatically by feeling and emoting and expressing through your body, which is exactly what breathwork is. And if you feel like you don't have clarity around like what's not working and where you're stuck, and you just feel stagnant in your energy or in your space or in your life, breathwork can help you get more clarity and just move through some of that. So you can find all of that on my website or on my Instagram or my TikTok.
Which I'll put the links below. Or it's
perfect.
It's DanielleHatton.com, right?
Yeah, with 2 N's. Yeah, my website is daniellehatton.com, and then my Instagram is Danielle Hatton with 2 N's at the end.
Amazing. Okay. Last 3 questions, unless you have anything else to add.
No, fire at me.
How do you stay grounded?
Remembering that everything is not in my control. Only I'm in my control.
And do you like remind yourself of that daily?
Yeah, whenever I'm feeling uprooted, whenever I'm trying to like control an outcome or I feel myself chaotic, it's like come back to my body, breathe, remember that I'm not in control of everything. I'm only in control of this present moment. So what am I choosing to believe or see or do in this moment? That's most supportive for me. Also, always feet on the ground, obviously.
Is there a book that's had a big impact on you?
Oh my God. So I just finished reading Women Who Love Too Much. Did I tell you about this book?
Maybe. Someone's told me about it recently.
Oh my
maybe
God.
It's been in the WhatsApp group.
So good. Maybe. I have probably like 30 pages left, but it's been really interesting for me. It's basically about codependency. And yeah, just so fascinating to understand your behaviors based back to your childhood. But the whole concept is about women who love too much, which from her perspective means losing yourself in relationship and really trying to control a man to be something that he isn't. And then what happens most of the time is that when that man becomes what it is that you desire or what you've been trying to make him be in the first place, you're no longer interested because you no longer have somebody to help, and your whole life's motive has been about like helping somebody and finding a man who's a project who needs you. And when they no longer need you in that element, in that way, you're then like, this is rubbish, like this is unfulfilling. So that's been really interesting for me. I see a lot of the stuff, some of the things, some of the behaviors in myself, and a lot of them in my clients. Yeah.
So interesting. Yeah. There's so much in this podcast has come up that I'm like, it's so familiar in my life, but I'm like, okay, this podcast episode is not about me. Like even the trip, you going to Mallorca, like my first like little mini solo trip breaking it myself was to Menorca. So not quite the same, but
oh my
close.
God. We need to like have a proper chat.
Yeah. Okay, last question. What 3 words describe the best version of you?
Oh, I always say golden. Like I always feel like I'm golden, and like when I feel like in my heart center, I like to feel like gold light. So I'd say golden. I would say courageous. I think I'm very courageous in like putting myself out there, taking leaps, taking risks, backing myself. And I think the third word, um, I would say playful. I think I'm very playful. Like, I love to have fun. I'm very like giddy. I love to just make things silly and like not take things too seriously. I think obviously my work is very deep and emotional and intense. And I love to bring light to that. Just being like, okay, look at us go. Here we are doing the same thing again. Like, let's make it light and like playful. I love to obviously dance around and just be silly and not, yeah, not take myself too seriously.
Amazing. Thank you so
Mm.
much.
Thank you. This was so fun. I feel like I've just discovered so many things about myself through sharing. So, thank you so much for having me. And if you listen, thank you so much for listening. I hope that this was of service in some way.
Yeah, I feel like 80% of what you said could be turned into TikToks to like massively help people. Like, I'm just like, oh my God, this is so good.